Clarity and inner peace are the fruits of walking in God's will. When God is guiding you to let go of someone, you will find that even amidst the storm of emotions, there is a stillness that settles in your heart. This peace isn't the absence of challenges, but rather the presence of God's wisdom. It is in these moments of inner calm that you begin to understand that God's plan for you is greater than the struggle you may face in holding on to someone who isn't meant to stay in your life. When God is urging you to step away, there is often a sense of clarity that comes with it. It's not the confusion, uncertainty, or inner turmoil that you once experienced. Instead, there's a clear understanding that this is the right step, even if it's not easy. You no longer feel like you're trying to force things to fit or constantly searching for answers. The path ahead may still be unclear, but in your heart, you will know that the decision to let go aligns with the purpose God has designed for you. In those moments when the peace of God fills your soul, trust that it is His voice leading you. His guidance often whispers through your heart, bringing you a quiet confidence, reassuring you that His will is always for your good, even when it involves parting ways with someone you may care about deeply. Emotional drainage and stagnation are powerful signs that God may be telling you to give up on someone. Relationships that are meant to be life-giving and nurturing should uplift and empower us. But when you find yourself constantly pouring out without receiving, when every interaction with this person leaves you feeling more exhausted, spiritually depleted, and disconnected from your own purpose, it is a clear indicator that something isn't right. God doesn't want you to stay in a relationship that drains your emotional and spiritual resources. When you experience stagnation in a relationship, there's often a deep sense of being stuck. No growth, no progress, just a repetition of the same patterns. You feel like you're moving in circles, caught in a cycle of unresolved issues and unmet needs. The energy you give may not be reciprocated, and the relationship may no longer serve the purpose God intended for it. Rather than leading to growth, it keeps you in a place of emotional stagnation, preventing you from flourishing in other areas of your life. God designed relationships to be sources of mutual growth, love, and support, but when they become a place of constant struggle, frustration, and emotional exhaustion, it can be a sign that He is calling you to reevaluate your attachment to that person. In the midst of emotional drain and stagnation, God may be offering the gentle nudge to let go, for He knows that continuing in this state will only keep you from stepping into the fullness of the life He has prepared for you. Closed doors and repeated failures are often signs that God is trying to communicate with us about a relationship or situation. When you constantly encounter obstacles, when every effort you make to connect or move forward with someone leads to disappointment or setback, it becomes difficult to ignore the pattern that is emerging. It's not just a temporary hurdle or a minor misunderstanding. It's a consistent, recurring failure that prevents progress despite your best intentions. God works through circumstances to guide us. And when doors continue to close, no matter how hard you try, it's His way of making it clear that this person may not be part of His plan for your life. Sometimes, God will block paths not because He wants to punish us, but because He is protecting us from something that isn't in alignment with His will. These repeated failures are not necessarily a reflection of your effort or the worth of the other person, but a sign that this relationship is not where God wants you to focus your energy. The more you try to push through these closed doors, the more you may feel like you're swimming upstream, fighting against God's will for your life. His guidance is often more obvious in these moments of struggle. Rather than trying to force open doors that refuse to budge, he calls us to trust that he knows better. Every failed attempt may be an invitation to release control and trust in his timing and wisdom. God's protection through discomfort is one of the most profound and often misunderstood aspects of his love for us. In the midst of trials and discomfort, we tend to focus on the pain or confusion we experience. However, what we fail to realize is that these moments of unease are sometimes God's way of guarding us, of shielding us from something that could be more harmful in the long run. When he leads us through discomfort, it isn't punishment, it's his protective hand guiding us away from what's not meant for us. Discomfort, particularly in relationships, is something many of us avoid or try to numb, but it can serve as a divine alarm, alerting us to the fact that things are not as they should be. God knows what we cannot see and loves us enough to stir our hearts when something isn't right, even if we're reluctant to acknowledge it. The feeling of unease you experience when interacting with certain people or in specific situations is often a nudge from the Holy Spirit, a gentle reminder that what seems comfortable on the surface may be hiding something beneath that isn't in alignment with His will. There are times when God allows us to experience emotional discomfort so that we may gain clarity. You may feel a constant restlessness when around a particular person or situation. It may seem as if every interaction with them brings about confusion, anger, or sorrow. At first, this may feel like a burden or something that must be endured. But the truth is, this discomfort is God's way of showing you that something needs to change. Just as a loving parent doesn't allow their child to stay in harmful situations, God doesn't want us to stay in relationships that are unhealthy for us, even when we're reluctant to leave. This discomfort can manifest in many forms. It could be a sense of emotional turbulence, where your heart feels unsettled and anxious when you're around someone. Or perhaps you begin to notice that despite your best efforts, the relationship is taking more from you than it is giving. You might start questioning your self-worth, doubting your value, or feeling as though you are losing yourself in the process. These signs of emotional depletion are often God's protection. He is drawing your attention to the fact that the relationship is out of balance and that it is not serving your spiritual or emotional health. In these moments of discomfort, we are often faced with a choice. We can either continue to endure the pain, hoping that things will improve, or we can step into the unknown, trusting that God has something better for us. It is tempting to cling to what feels familiar or comfortable, even when it causes us pain. But God's protective love sometimes means leading us away from what we think we want and into what we truly need. Our discomfort is often a signal that He is holding us close, guiding us toward healing and wholeness, even if it requires us to step away from someone or something we've been attached to for a long time. Furthermore, God's protection through discomfort is a way for Him to sharpen our discernment. As we grow in our spiritual understanding, we begin to recognize the signs He uses to direct our paths. This means we no longer rely solely on our feelings or judgments, but trust the wisdom He provides. When the discomfort in a relationship becomes too overwhelming to ignore, it's a chance for us to pause, reflect, and ask God for clarity. Through this, we learn to rely on His voice above all else, even when it's difficult to let go of our attachments. God's protection doesn't always look like a smooth or painless path. Sometimes it appears in the form of discomfort and struggle, because He understands that growth often comes through challenge. When we face relational discomfort, it is an invitation to trust Him more deeply, knowing that He is using the discomfort to guide us toward something better. Even when the path feels uncertain or painful, we can rest in the assurance that God's plan is always for our ultimate good and safety. Through the discomfort, He is leading us to a place of greater freedom, peace, and spiritual fulfillment. The call to walk in freedom is one of the most powerful invitations God extends to us. Freedom, as God intends it, is not just the absence of physical chains or restrictions, but the liberation of our hearts and minds from the burdens that weigh us down. This freedom calls us to step away from relationships, situations, and mindsets that limit our growth, hinder our peace, and keep us from fully embracing the life God has destined for us. It's a freedom that invites us to walk in His love and His purpose, unencumbered by the things that no longer serve us, even when it requires us to let go of people or things we may have once held dear. When God calls us to walk in freedom, it's a call to release the emotional and spiritual weight that binds us. Relationships that drain us, places that discourage us, or mindsets that keep us stuck, all contribute to a sense of bondage. These are often the very things that keep us from moving forward in the fullness of God's plan for our lives. The more we stay attached to things that are not aligned with God's will, the heavier our hearts become. But the call to freedom is a divine invitation to let go of these burdens, trusting that God has something more for us, something that will uplift us and allow us to fully embrace His calling. This call to freedom is not always easy, especially when it involves letting go of people we love or situations that have been a part of our lives for a long time. It can feel like stepping into the unknown, and fear of change or loss can hold us back. However, true freedom is not found in clinging to the past or staying in relationships that no longer nurture our growth. It is found in surrendering those things to God, trusting that He knows what is best for us. When we choose to walk in freedom, we are saying that we trust God more than we trust our own understanding or comfort. One of the most significant aspects of walking in freedom is the realization that God desires for us to be free from anything that keeps us from fully experiencing His love. God's love is not conditional on our relationships with others or our circumstances. He loves us unconditionally, and His desire is for us to walk in the peace and joy that come from being in right relationship with Him. When we cling to unhealthy relationships or situations, we often find ourselves tied to things that interfere with our intimacy with God. The call to freedom is, in essence, a call to draw closer to Him, to make room for His presence in our lives by letting go of what weighs us down. Walking in freedom also means stepping into the fullness of our identity in Christ. We were not created to be in relationships or situations that stifle our potential or cause us to compromise our values. God has uniquely designed each of us to live a life of purpose and impact. When we are free from the distractions, limitations, and unhealthy attachments that can come from others, we are able to walk in the fullness of our calling. We are able to pursue the dreams and passions God has placed within us, unburdened by fear, guilt, or shame. The freedom that God calls us to is also a freedom to love ourselves and others from a place of wholeness. When we are free, we are able to give love without expecting it in return, because we no longer find our identity in others. We can love others authentically, not out of obligation, but out of the overflow of the love we've received from God. It's a freedom that allows us to serve and bless others without losing ourselves in the process. Moreover, walking in freedom allows us to experience peace in a way that transcends our circumstances. It's not a peace that comes from external validation or the approval of others, but a peace that comes from knowing we are aligned with God's will. It's the kind of peace that passes understanding, because we know that as we walk in freedom, we are walking in His purpose, trusting that He will lead us step by step into the life He has for us. God's call to walk in freedom is an invitation to trust Him deeply, to release the things that bind us, and to embrace the fullness of life He offers. It's a call to live with an open heart, free from the chains of fear, past hurt, and unhealthy attachments, knowing that in His freedom we find our truest selves. Walking in freedom is not just a one-time decision. It's a daily surrender to God's will, allowing Him to guide us into greater peace, purpose, and joy. Faith in God's plan is the cornerstone of our spiritual journey. It is a deep trust that the path God has set before us is not just for His glory, but for our ultimate good, even when we cannot see how every piece fits together. Faith in God's plan is not blind optimism or wishful thinking. It is a confident assurance that, even in times of uncertainty, God is working all things together for a purpose we may not yet fully understand. It is rooted in the belief that God is sovereign, that He knows what is best for us, and that His plan is always better than our own. One of the greatest challenges we face in walking by faith is surrendering our own plans and desires. We often want to control the direction of our lives, especially when we feel uncertain or when things don't seem to be going the way we envisioned. We may become frustrated or discouraged when things don't happen according to our timing, but faith in God's plan requires us to let go of our expectations and trust that He has a perfect design for our lives, even when it doesn't make sense at the moment. It means choosing to rely on His wisdom rather than our own understanding. God's plan for our lives is always grounded in love, and His love is what should anchor our faith. Even when circumstances are difficult, when doors close, or when relationships fail, God's love remains constant. It is in those moments of hardship that we are called to trust that God is still in control, and that He is not only allowing these things for a reason, but will use them for our good. Our faith is tested in times of uncertainty, but it is precisely in these times that we are called to stand firm and trust that God is faithful to His promises. Faith in God's plan also requires patience. We often want to see immediate results or clear answers, but God's plan unfolds in His perfect timing. Trusting in His timing means recognizing that there is a season for everything under heaven. Sometimes the waiting period is not just about patience, but about preparation. God uses the waiting seasons of our lives to refine us, to develop our character, and to teach us lessons that will equip us for what lies ahead. This process may be uncomfortable, but it is in the waiting that our faith is strengthened, and we are drawn closer to Him. When we place our faith in God's plan, we also acknowledge that His ways are higher than our ways, and His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. There may be moments when we cannot see the bigger picture, when we cannot understand why certain things are happening, but faith allows us to trust that God sees what we cannot. His plan is greater than our immediate circumstances. It's a plan that encompasses not only the present moment, but also our past and future. Every step we take, every decision we make, is part of a divine design that is unfolding over time. In moments of doubt or confusion, it can be helpful to reflect on past experiences where God has shown himself faithful. These are the moments where we can look back and see how God's hand was at work, even when we didn't recognize it at the time. Remembering his past faithfulness gives us the courage to trust him in the present and future. Faith in God's plan also involves being open to change. Sometimes we may have to let go of our own desires or preconceived notions about what our lives should look like. We may be called to step into new opportunities or take on new roles that challenge us. But in every change, we can trust that God's plan is not just a reaction to our mistakes or missteps. It is a part of his perfect will. Walking in faith means being willing to embrace the new things God is doing in our lives, knowing that he is leading us into something greater than we could have imagined for ourselves. When we have faith in God's plan, we are free from the anxiety of trying to control every detail of our lives. We are able to surrender our fears and uncertainties to him, knowing that he is guiding us with wisdom, love, and grace. Faith gives us the strength to move forward, to take risks, and to trust in God's provision. It empowers us to live with a sense of peace and assurance, because we know that no matter what happens, God is in control, and his plan for our lives will never fail.